Hello. Now we're going to continue on with our work in natural numbers today, and we're going to look at the idea of a consecutive number and an inverse operation. And by the end of our quick chat, we're going to know exactly what both of those things mean. So consecutive just means the next number in a pattern. That's all it means. There's nothing frightening about it. We just need to get used to the word, because it's going to be very important all the way up to our leaving cert. So what would be the next number in a pattern? Well, if I'm dealing with the natural numbers, if I'm dealing with the set, which is natural numbers, I write them down, I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need to move on, so I'm going to do my ... to tell me that the pattern keeps going in that direction. Well, if I take an example of one of the elements in that set, if I take 3 as one of the numbers from the natural numbers, so one of the elements of the set natural numbers, what's the next number in my pattern, the next number in my list, if they're going up in order? The next number is going to be 4. So the next consecutive number after 3 is 4. And what did we do in that case? We just added 1 to it. So to get to the next consecutive number in my natural numbers, I just add 1. But natural numbers aren't the only group of numbers that we could deal with. We already know about at least 2 other groups. Let's have a look quickly at even numbers. Well, what would the set even numbers, or even natural numbers, I should say. So I'm going to put a little, this is called a subscript, so even natural numbers. What are they going to look like? Well, they're going to be the even positive whole numbers. So that's going to be 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. And again, that goes on forever, so I have to put in my dots and close my curly bracket. Now, if I take one of my numbers from my ordered list here, and I have 6, what's the next consecutive even number? So it should be the next number in my pattern. Now last time I just added 1, but if I add 1 onto 6, I'm going to get 7. That's not an even number. What's the next even number? The next consecutive even number is 8. The next consecutive even number after 8 is 10. Well, what am I doing this time? This time I have to add 2 in order to get between my numbers, in order to get to the next number in my list. The other group that we've talked about out recently is odd. So what would be odd natural numbers? What would that set look like? Again, odd natural numbers. So that would be 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and so on. And odd numbers, again, are numbers that aren't divisible by 2. When we divide them by 2, we end up with a fraction, a number we don't like at the moment. So if I take number 3 here again, like I did up here, if I take the number 3, what would be the next consecutive odd number? Well, it would be the next number in my pattern, the next number in my ordered group. So that would be 5. What would be the next number in my pattern after that? The next consecutive odd number would be 7. And again, we can see that each time we're adding 2. We're adding 2 here. We're adding 2 here. Just like we were adding 2 each time here. And that was what was getting us between our numbers, whereas here we were only adding 1 each time. So it depends on the pattern we're dealing with, the group that we're dealing with, the set that we're dealing with, in order to figure out what our relationship is going to be between the numbers. But consecutive always means the same idea. It means what's the next number in our pattern. Now, inverse is our other idea for today. And inverse just means an action that undoes another action. Let's make this more concrete, because that sounds a little bit abstract. If I start out at the number 10 and I add 2 to it, I'm going to start out at 10, I add 2, so I get bigger by 2, I'm going to end up at 12. So now I'm at 12. If I want to end up back where I started, if I want to undo the work that I just did, undo adding on 2, if I want to undo what I just did, I'd end up subtracting 2 away. To begin with, I added on 2. If I wanted to undo that, I would end up subtracting 2. And I'd start at 12 and I'd go down 2, because I'm subtracting, I get smaller by 2, and I'd end up back at 10 again. So I started at 10. I did an action. The action was adding 2. And then to undo that action, I took away 2, and I'm left back where I started. So that's what we can see here as an inverse action. So if I add on 2, the inverse action would be to subtract 2. So what you're going to see from time to time is that the inverse action undoes the first action that we tried. And again, action here just means something that we do in maths. So in this case, we added on 2, and then to undo that, we took away 2, we subtracted 2. So addition, we say, addition is the inverse of subtraction. Addition is the inverse of subtraction. One undoes the other. Let's take another one. If I was at 23 and I took away 5, where am I going to end up? If I'm at 23 and I take away 5, I'm going to get smaller by 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I end up down at 18. So I'm now at 18. If I want to end up back at 23 to undo what I just did, what am I going to need to do? I'm going to need to do the inverse, and that is going to be to add 5. So you can see that they're effectively opposites. They undo each other. So if I start at 18, and I want to get back up to 23, I'm going to need to add 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I end up back at 23 where I started. So this is the idea of an inverse. Now at the moment, we might wonder why we would ever care about such a thing. But it turns out this is going to be really important for understanding some of the more complicated maths that we do later on. When we come to learning about the maths of triangles next year, we're going to see why inverses and actions that undo other actions are going to be really important for understanding some problems in maths, and we want to get ourselves prepared for that type of idea now. So that's why we're talking about this in terms of addition and subtraction, and we're going to look at it in terms of multiplication and division as well, because as it turns out they're also inverses of each other. So we're going to look at that in more detail later on, and it's going to be really important next year.